And we are live. We are live on the Habit Finder Facebook page. I am Paul Blanchard, president of Habit Finder, and this is Disrupt Your Week, a version of a show that I've been doing for over 5 years, every week on the Facebook page of Habit Finder or for our clients. Right now, we are simultaneously broadcasting on Clubhouse, which is super fun. If you haven't gotten in there, I recommend you get in there. The access that you're getting to incredible people. You know, you've got some of the biggest names in any industry, in marketing and sales, in network marketing, in branding, all these different things, and gurus and motivational speakers are on Clubhouse. It's not recorded. You have to be there live to hear it, and they have to be there live to deliver it, which is awesome. And I wanted to include our Clubhouse audience in the show that I do every week, so that if it's more convenient for people to just listen on Clubhouse, they can just jump in and listen. And those of you here live that can see me on the Habit Finder Facebook page, excited to be here. So any of you joining on the Facebook page or joining in Clubhouse, I'll be speaking to both of you today. And then at the end of today's session, which are typically about 25, 30 minutes long, at the end of today's session, I'm going to stay on in the Clubhouse room to do some interactive Q&A. I can't do that on here because you can't record what you're doing, you know, what other people are saying, other people are sharing on Clubhouse. It's against community guidelines. So and also just as a bonus for people getting to listen on Clubhouse. So if you're watching this on the Habit Finder Facebook page, welcome. Excited to have you here. As we wrap up today's session, you can totally jump on Clubhouse if you've already got it, and follow me at Paul Blanchard on Clubhouse. And we're going to have some Q&A at the end of today's session where we are talking about your personal brand. We're talking about one of the most unique and important assets that you have to develop. So excited to be here talking with you on our Facebook show here. And those of you listening in on Clubhouse, again, these go about 25, 30 minutes. And then I'm going to open things up. I'm going to sign off of Facebook and open things up on Clubhouse for interactive Q&A. So as you're listening, as you're here, looking forward to bringing you up on stage and answering any questions you've got and diving a little bit deeper from today's topic. So excited to do that. All right, let's dive into this. Those of you who are new to Habit Finder, new to the Augmentino Group, to me as the president of those companies, just let me give you a little bit of premise. There are several areas that you can develop good habits in, that you can improve yourself in personal development. And they're typically behavioral, emotional, and then there is the source, which is your thinking patterns, your neurological patterns that process your life internally and process your life externally. And Habit Finder is built on the foundation of two things. One is the 10 scrolls from The Greatest Sales in the World by Augmentino, because that's how our company got started. We started as the official Augmentino company. Then we wanted to go out and learn how to measure those things. We wanted to bring measurement to how we think, measurement to the habits that Augmentino was writing about over half a century ago, and that have been validated by neuroscience in ways that are just beyond my understanding of the way he wrote. And then they didn't find out and find out how the brain worked in some of those areas until like the last 10 years. So when we talk about personal development, we want to make it personal again. When we talk about mindset, we're not talking about a primarily philosophical or conceptual conversation. We're talking about the scientific and objective construct of your mind, because personal development is not a philosophical game. Okay, trying to take on personal development with philosophy is like bringing a squirt gun to a shootout. Okay, you're going to have a really difficult time competing with the person who's got a 9mm on the other side and you've got a squirt gun. So we want to understand how the brain actually works, and that's what we do here. And one of the greatest concepts we can learn is to disrupt yourself. That is my primary focus as the president of this company, as a coach, as a speaker, is I want to disrupt you. I don't need you to think what I think. I just want to disrupt what you think so that you can start to learn new things. And in order to learn new truths, we've got to let the old ones die. And that's a more painful process than a lot of people are willing to admit. It's very difficult to do at times. So when we get in here every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, we want to deliver things that can disrupt your patterns of thinking. There may be things I say that you don't agree with. I hope there are, because those are some of the most disruptive things you can process. All I ask is for you to curiously explore why you disagree with them. If there's something I say that offends you, even better. I'm not going to try to. That's not my MO. Okay. Paul likes to tell it like it is. I actually don't like to tell it like it is. It's difficult to do. At my core, I'm a very insecure person, but it's why I feel like my gifts of being able to communicate, connect, and disrupt are magnified, because I've never lost connection to that insecurity. I've never lost connection to the little boy in me, if you will, that wasn't quite sure how to dress or wasn't quite sure how to act, and still stays connected to that, to never forget some of the most beautiful and intimate parts of being human. Because there's a major challenge in our brains. We believe that we are driving towards a finished product in our lives. We believe that there is an arrival, that we're going to arrive. We're going to be exonerated or relieved of our struggle if we can just figure out the right things and put the right combination into the lock of our lives. And it doesn't exist. The journey is the reward. The journey is the payoff. And there's a lot of disruption that we're going to want to have occur for us to be able to do that. And today we're talking about your brand on your journey. As you're journeying through this life, as you're realizing that you are not a finished product, and you never will be in this life. But that's the great news. Mathematically, we know that as human beings, we are intrinsic, meaning we go on infinitely. So the more you learn about you, guess what? The more there is to learn about you. Now we're going to talk today a little bit about bringing that into your brand. We launched a new course in December called Cracking the Social Code, because we realized that social media, in particular Facebook, which is still the bank of social currency. Okay, there are tons of great platforms out there. I'm on one right now simultaneously as we're doing this. I'm on Clubhouse so people can hear this. If you're just joining the room, I'm doing my live show on the Habit Finder Facebook page. And it usually goes about 25, 30 minutes, so till about 10:30 Mountain Time. Then I'm going to sign off of Facebook and stay on Clubhouse and answer people's questions about today's show. There are so many great social media platforms, and we get the opportunity to show up on there. But I still believe that Facebook is still the bank, whether you like it or not. Definitely don't want to get into a political conversation about Facebook, because there's plenty of ammunition there. But it is still the place where everybody is. Statistically, even the people that are saying they're leaving have not left yet. It's like all the people who said they hated America but never moved out. Okay, they stayed here. Imagine that. Okay, so we've got this opportunity to show up, and it's so important that we show up on these platforms with a personal brand. Now, we built that course, Cracking the Code, for people that wanted to be able to get out of the ponds of social media and get into the ocean of connection, because Facebook is like a grocery store. Everything you really need is in the back. Okay, the milk, the eggs, the basics, and they design it to make you walk through a bunch of crap you don't need, and the tchotchkes by the cashier and everything else, to create noise and distraction to get the most out of you while you're in there. And Facebook's no different. But if you know why you're going in there and you're getting in there intentionally, okay, and you don't need to prove anything to anybody, you don't need approval from anybody else, and we'll talk about that today. You can get in, get stuff, and it can be convenient, it can be powerful, all the things on Facebook. And so when we started constructing this course, this experience, we realized, wow, social media is like a mirror to the soul. Like I get the challenges of social media, the browsing mentality, getting sucked in, the cyberbullying. There's a lot of stuff that you want to be aware of, but there's a lot of good that can be done with it. And one of the most disruptive things you can do with it is when you start to become intentional, you start walking through the aisles to get right to the back to get what you really need, and then get out to be intentional and not get lost in it. You start learning some things about yourself. You start posting some things and having people comment on them. You start getting interaction. You start creating real connection. The whole goal of the course is to put the social back in social media. You start doing that, and you start exposing your unhealthy habits of thinking. You start learning more about you. Okay. And when doing this, you're going to get the opportunity to start to develop your personal brand. Now, whatever product you represent, because most people that work with us and most people that are in Cracking the Code have a product or a service or a mission that they're driving forward, a message they want people to buy, even though they may not give them money for it. They want them to buy it intrinsically or whatever it is. So we're all offering something on there. And as we do so, we want to make sure that we lead with our personal brand, not with our product or service. Because more than likely, I guarantee you, there are at least thousands of people, if not millions of people, offering a similar product, a similar service, or a similar message, a similar mission. And that's beautiful. Because you look at the population, you look at the billions of people that are on there, there is more than enough abundance, more than enough access for you to find your tribe, for you to find your people, if you will lead with a personal brand, with who you are. Now, I was just in a clubhouse room with some of the top marketing and branding social media experts on the planet, with hundreds of people in there. It was an amazing conversation, and a gentleman who runs one of the top promotional companies. It's under the umbrella of NBC, was in there and talked about how personal branding, as it's taught by most people, is overrated. And I was so glad he said that, because I didn't want to rock the boat, but I wanted to say it. So I came out and said, thank you so much, Chris, for saying that, because it is. The way people teach branding in terms of this presentational manufactured box is so like putting the cart before the horse, so missing the mark, that I had to jump on here and disrupt your week and talk about how you actually build your personal brand and what the shadow side to building your personal brand and bringing it into the arena of social media is. What buttons is it going to push in you and in your mind? That's what we want to talk about today. So first, let's start with what your personal brand is. And in true Paul Blanchard fashion, we're going to start etymologically. Okay, we're going to start with the words. I love words. Okay, so first I wanted to look at brand. Now, I always find it interesting when we use words today that originally didn't mean what they mean today. So the word brand, as we understand representing a product or a service or whatever it might be, the way we understand that today actually didn't come about until the 18th century. So, but for a long time before that, if we go to a word that would make me sound way smarter than I actually am, the Proto-Indo-European root of the word is actually heat. The root of the word brand is heat. And before it was ever a representation of a product or service, it was a mark made by a hot iron. That's what a brand is. Okay, that's the most common traditional historical representation of a brand. The root of the word is heat, and then we learned it was a mark made by a hot iron before it became a representation or manufactured presentation of a brand or a service or a product or a company. But the heat part is what I want to focus on. The hot iron is what I want to focus on, because that is where you get the essence of your brand. What are your hot irons? What is the heat that you've experienced in your life? And what are you allowing it to teach you? Now, some of you have really opened up to allowing that heat to make its mark, hopefully specifically making a mark on your heart, on your character. This is something we teach our clients, is to allow those hot irons that we've had, to allow those marks and that heat to be engraved on our hearts, to become an asset. Because if any of you struggle with procrastination, if any of you struggle with excuses or any of those things, the number one source of excuses and procrastination and anything that holds us back, sabotaging dialogue, comes from pain that we have not embraced and assigned intentional purpose to. That's where it comes from. You have a bag of excuses that were created from pain, from those hot irons in your life that maybe you haven't owned and allowed to give you purpose to serve another person. Even worse, maybe you've taken that bag of hot irons and challenges and you've tried to go bury them. You've tried to pretend they aren't there. Oh, I've gotten over them. I got over it. I've let that go. There is an unbreakable tether between that bag of hot irons, that bag of heat of what you've been through in your life. Okay, those dark nights, those difficult situations, those challenges, those things that if you put on the grand scale of life, you may compare to someone else and it hasn't been as bad for them, but they're yours. You suffered them. You felt alone, like you were the only one going through something like that. And if you haven't owned it, and even worse, if you think you've gotten over it, it's time to go back and use it, because it's the greatest source of your brand, of where you come from, because it's what's taught you more about you than anything else. Now, we don't want to look at the hot irons. We don't want to look at the heat as showing that we're broken, showing that we're not enough. We want to understand the benefit, the light, the power of every one of those experiences, because they have uniquely prepared you to serve someone else. Now, one thing I love about Clubhouse, and we've got people hopping in and listening, welcome for those of you on Clubhouse, and welcome to those of you hopping into Facebook Live. I'm broadcasting on both live right now. This is my live weekly show that I do on the Habit Finder Facebook page called Disrupt Your Week. And at the end of this show, here in about 10, 15 minutes, I'm going to sign off of Facebook and take questions and interact with some people on Clubhouse. So if you're watching here, you're welcome to jump into Clubhouse right afterwards, or get on there now if it's more convenient for you to listen. My handle is at Paul Blanchard, so nice and simple. But we're talking about creating your personal brand, and talking about how branding, as it is taught by most, puts the cart before the horse. And in fact, in most cases, it's very overrated. A brand it comes from the source of heat, and it comes from it meant a mark made by a hot iron before it ever meant a representation of a business or a product or whatever it was. And getting the opportunity to be able to dig in and find our hot irons of our life, our challenges in our life, and allow those to shape us. Now, you don't just get to find the hot irons and go out there and broadcast them. That's not a brand. It's not, oh, I've been through this, I've done this, I was hurt by this, and I've been through that. That's not branding. A brand is something you should feel. That's why I love the word heat. People should feel the warmth. People should feel the heat, the challenge, the way that it warms their soul, but also the way that it gets them up and going. Okay, I think of like Zorro, when Antonio Banderas is doing those push-ups over the candles, and every time he got low, he couldn't help but push up again because of that heat. Heat both drives us and warms and soothes us, and we want our brand to have both of those kinds of heat available to it, because we use it. And yeah, totally, a little sizzle, okay? Seeing that comment from John, a little bit of sizzle is totally a good thing in terms of your brand. You want to be interesting, but don't try to be interesting. I promise you, if you will own your hot irons, you will own your challenges, you will be interesting. There is nothing more interesting than authenticity. Okay, there's nothing more interesting than authenticity. So trust that as you're developing your personal brand. So rather than look for something presentational, rather than trying to build a float that's going to go down the parade of your life as your brand, look inside and consider your painful life experiences, especially the ones you think you let go of, especially the ones you compared to other people's life experiences. Well, it's not that bad. That person went through this and that. And I don't want to give any specific examples because I want to be really sensitive to people who have been through those. But there are some of your like idealistic traumas, which is a really weird way to say it. But you talk about people's challenges of specific things they've been through that you would put up on the Olympic podium of trauma and challenges. There is no podium. There is no comparison. Trauma is when something happens in your life that your brain was not expecting. That's what trauma is. And you want to own yours. That's where your personal brand comes from. And when you truly embrace it, guess what you don't need to do with it? You don't need to defend it. You don't need to prove it. And you don't need to be motivated by it. It's an inspiration, meaning it breathes life into you because you're connecting with the things that have uniquely prepared you to serve. That's your brand. And there are lots of ways to do it. And it doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be perfect. Remember, we are letting go of the human condition of believing that we're on a path to becoming a finished product. We're not. And your brand never will be either. It gets to be you, all of you, everything about you. Now, again, we're talking about the heat, the hot irons of our lives. It's not about going out and telling sob stories. It's not about going out and just, see, here's my broken heart. What is it? I would die for, what's her name? Inside Out. Sorry, now that's reeling over and over in my head. Anyway, I'm sure someone will come in the chats and help me remember what her name is. But with that said, it's not about broadcasting that stuff. You want the warmth, the heat to come from the questions you ask of other people, the space you're able to hold for them, that you don't need to be a walking commercial. You can take the me out of the message. Thank you, Megan Brenna. I would die for Riley. Okay. You don't need to be that person. You don't need to be dramatic, because that's exactly, Kristen, that is the victim. But guess what? The victor and the victim live right next to each other. They live right next to each other. It's not hard to take a wrong turn as a victor and end up in the town of victim. But if you're trying to avoid being a victim by ignoring all the stuff that's happened to you, I'm not going to talk about that. That'll make me sound weak. That'll make me sound unauthentic. That'll make me sound inhuman. And I need to prop myself up as a leader. Blah, 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 blah. The further you get away from the town of victim, the further you're getting away from the town of victor. And eventually you come back full circle and you run into the town of victim anyway. But now you're weary from your travel and you're not ready to handle it. So you don't even realize you're being a victim. So then your brain starts trying to find the villain. Then you find yourself in a mess of life and you miss the opportunity to build and use your personal brand more productively. Now, where I want you to start is with your painful life experiences. I want you to take inventory, write them down, and write down the purpose. What purpose are you assigning to them today? Who are you assigning that purpose to? Who do you want to help? Who do you want to serve? Who do you want to help? That's how you build a personal brand. And then you can shape it and you can use it and without losing yourself, to be able to make sure that you can step into higher and higher levels of your life and others, and people will be naturally attracted to you because they'll feel the difference between your brand and your identity. And that's what I want to talk next. It is so important you understand the difference between your brand and your identity. I just want to reset the room really quick. Those of you listening here on Facebook Live, thank you for being here. Please tag, share this out. This is my live 30-minute show that I do every Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. But I also want to thank those of you on Clubhouse listening. I'm simultaneously broadcasting this on Clubhouse so that people can listen in there as well. And then after the show finishes here in about 5 minutes, I'm going to sign off of Facebook and I'm going to interact with people on Clubhouse and Q&A based on today's topic. So please, if you're on Clubhouse, stick around. Looking forward to bringing you up on stage, answering your questions, talking more deeply about building your personal brand and giving you as much practicality and anything else that I can provide. So that's what we're doing right now. In case you notice them, I'm looking down. I'm just checking the room here in Clubhouse, as well as here as we're in Facebook Live on the Habit Finder Facebook page. And we're talking about disrupting your week with your personal brand, which the root of the word brand comes from heat, from hot irons that make a mark. And that's where we want to build our personal brand from. We want to build it from those things. And you're going to know you're doing that well because you'll start putting your personal brand out there and someone might not like it. And you're okay with it. You don't look at your brand as something fragile because you are not your brand. You are your identity. And that's what I want to finish with today because it's a critical piece for people that are going out there and getting sucked into the game of fake it till you make it, getting sucked into the game of facade. And I was in a Clubhouse room with my dear friend Jason Cisneros the other day, and someone was talking about imposter syndrome. And he was like, dude, we're all imposters. None of us live up to our own ideals. We all have this idea of who we want to be and how we want to show up, but none of us measure up. And I would argue to say that our ideal, how we want to show up is like the North Star. We use it to guide us and direct us, to give us the direction of where we're headed. Okay. Kristen, the room is called Disrupt Your Week, live weekly show and Q&A. So if you look me up, I think you should be able to find it. Or if you search Disrupt Your Week, hopefully it pops up. If you're following me, you should get alerts. What you want to do is if you're in Clubhouse, follow me and then click on the chime, the bell button, and hit always, because then it'll tell you whenever I start this room every time, rather than just every once in a while when it thinks it might help you do that. So awesome. Okay, cool. I want to wrap this up and then we're going to go into Q&A on Clubhouse right after this. So if you're in the Clubhouse room, please stick around. We're going to start interacting, bring you up on stage, process, share, answer questions. But this last piece is really important. Don't let your personal brand become your identity. Remember, your brand is your hot irons, your heat of your life, of your experiences that you're offering up with unique perspective and productivity. Okay. It's exactly, Aaron, it is not fake it till you make it. It is decide who you are in advance and start taking the baby steps to get there by building your personal brand, by not trying to be a superhuman, but being superhuman, connecting with who you are, your authenticity, and owning that, and not needing to broadcast it, not needing to tell sob stories or I would die for Riley or anything like that. Okay. Get the opportunity to show up and care more about other people because you care more about yourself. It's an interesting equation. You don't surrender yourself in the equation. Okay. Biblically, and I don't want to offend anyone's belief system. Okay. But biblically, it says, love others the way you love yourself. And the best way to love yourself is to love others because of what you learn about yourself in that process. And so, but we want to make sure that we don't take our brand and our identity and go, let them get connected. Because then if someone doesn't like our brand, we feel it in a way that it's connected to our nervous system. We can't help but react, want to defend. We go into self-esteem preservation and we start catastrophizing. We start wondering how many other people might be thinking that. We can't sleep until we get with that person and make sure they understand that we didn't mean it that way or whatever it is. That is not a personal brand. That means you're allowing your identity to get tied up in your brand. You're allowing your brand to be your identity, which it's not. Your brand is, it's something that doesn't need to be proven. It comes from your experiences, your hot irons, your heat. Your identity is just two words. Your identity is I am, period. Dr. Robert Hartman had created the math and science for the Habit Finder assessment that in 10 minutes or less measures over 6 quadrillion variables in your brain. Don't worry, we know what that means, okay? We get the opportunity to be able to measure that and work with you on that, okay? But we want to understand that I am, period, is our identity. And anytime we're feeling anxious about what other people think about us, which is a very common human thing, whether we're trying to prove that we're good enough and we're on Clubhouse or we're on Facebook and we're all presenting ourselves as more successful than we actually are. We all are. Every one of us. Just make sure you know you're doing it so you can keep it within reason, so that you don't feel like an imposter, so that you don't try to build it off of a lie. But the highest form of existence, Dr. Hartman said, is I am. And the I am is the version of you that gets to step back from what you're experiencing, step back from what you're observing, step back from the emotions you've got. It doesn't mean you stop feeling them. It doesn't mean that you become invincible, but your identity can step back and observe them and put space between you and your brand, can put space between you and your role as a mother or a father, can put space between you and your job and your role there or your leadership. That space allows you to hold space for other people. Because then someone says something you don't like about your brand, and it doesn't become about defending your brand. It becomes a beautiful window to learn more about that person, to tell me more about that. And tell me more about that isn't something you just say. When you're on social media, when you're showing up and in your personal brand and your genius, it's an energy you bring to your brand. You want to have a tell me more about that kind of energy. I don't like you. Tell me more about that. I don't agree with you. Tell me more about that. I think that you should tell me more about that. Bring it, tell me more about that energy, because that will let you know that you're allowing your I am to stay intact and be in a position of observation. My dad wrote a whole book about it, The Observer's Chair. Incredible read, by the way, for understanding how to step out of these things that we want to tie our worth and our worthiness into that just aren't worth it. Building your brand should be fun. But fun because it also exposes other people's challenges, other people's things. How are you going to make an impact on this world if you're not willing to expose those things? If all you want to expose is sunshine and rainbows and flowers, then you're in the wrong place. I'm not a happy talk fan. I don't promote happy talk or positive thinking as the primary shield to life. It's not productive. I'm a bigger fan of letting go of that judgment and observing what you may have believed was good and bad for you and starting to see them as for you, not good and bad for you, for you to learn and to grow. So for you to really thrive in your personal brand, you're going to want to make sure your identity doesn't get sucked into it. Will it? Inevitably. Okay? I'm not talking from some high horse here that I'm invincible and people can't touch my identity as I put my personal brand out there. Of course not. No, I told you, I'm very insecure and I'm very aware of it most of the time. I believe it's what allows me to direct and guide my messaging to make sure that it isn't unreachable for people. So I never want to let go of that. But I know that when I'm getting really anxious or depressed or catastrophizing or playing out all these scenarios of what other people might be thinking or not wanting to offend or be misunderstood, that I am going to step back. And rather than I am angry, I'm going to say I am experiencing anger. I am observing it. I am disappointed. No, I'm going to say I am experiencing disappointment. I am striving to. Be really careful about what you put after I am. And that allows you to build your brand and put it out there to see who is attracted to it. And that may be people that are attracted to it to pick on it, but that's going to teach you wonderful things about them. And it's going to attract people that are going to love it. But you should have the same tell me more about that energy with all of them. Do those things. Your personal brand will thrive. Thank you for being with us here on the Facebook Live show. This every week, 10 a.m. Mountain Time on Wednesdays, we're here. I'm going to sign off of Facebook and stay on Clubhouse. If you're on Clubhouse, jump in the Disrupt Your Week room that I've got open right now. I'm going to bring some people on stage, answer some questions about your personal brand, about your identity, anything we talked about today. Signing off for now from Facebook. Thank you so much, everybody. Create a great week, a disrupted week, so that we can recognize the patterns that are no longer serving us and continue to evolve, because you will never be a finished product. Disruption is paramount. Excited to be with you today. Everybody take care. Bye-bye.